This is House Planning Help. Hello, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up today, we have an Encore episode, and this is where I give you an opportunity to listen to an important episode from the archive, something that I think will really benefit you. And we're going to be going back 4 years to hear my chat with Dr. Wolfgang Feist. I can't believe it was 4 years ago, but I'm well aware that I can't expect you to have listened to all of the episodes. Maybe you have. Maybe you've been with me the whole journey. And that's why over the next few weeks, just as we concentrate behind the scenes on producing a lot of new content, we're just going to review some of our most popular episodes. And I thought that this one in particular ties in rather well, because if you're listening to this at the time it's published, then the Passivhaus Open Days are back round again. It's an annual event, so if you've already missed it, every November they do that. Lovely owners of Passivhaus standard buildings all around the world, they fling open their doors and they say, come and check it out. Come and see what a Passivhaus is. Ask me any question you like, and then you can go there. And I think that's one of the great things is sometimes people can talk about the benefits and you don't really get it. Actually going there, experiencing the comfort, it is completely different. And I feel very privileged as part of some of the work that I've done at Regen Media to have travelled around to lots of Passivhaus buildings. You'll know that if you listen for some time. But today's episode, I suppose, is more aimed at you if you've just found this podcast and your Passivhaus what? You're not really sure. And there's no better person to help us today than the co-founder of the Passivhaus Standard himself, director of the Passivhaus Institute, that is Dr. Wolfgang Feist. And so he can explain what the Passivhaus Standard is, some of the work behind it, why it's relevant, and we are going to dig into that. So I started by asking him to tell me a little bit about his background.
Well, I'm a physicist, and we were working in the 70s on how to deliver the growing demand for energy in the world. And when we looked a little bit more thoroughly into what the energy is used for, the surprising result was that most of the energy is just wasted. So it's a good idea to first improve the efficiency we use the energy, and there's a big potential for improving efficiency.
And is that the best method to go for energy efficiency first and then to deal with how you meet those energy needs?
Yes, of course it is. It's like in every other things, first to look for what you really need, the services you really need, and then you can design, say, a building in a way that it uses far less energy than you are used to in the past.
What were the early challenges that you faced?
Of course, it's all a scientific issue. And so first thing to do was to look how is it possible and how far is it possible to improve the efficiency. But it very soon turned out that that is, scientifically speaking, quite easy. So the more important issue at the end is how to get that through to the market, because we are used to do it in a different way, and that's far more difficult than the scientific part.
So this brings us to the Passivhaus Standard, which is gathering momentum at the moment. What is it on its simplest level?
Well, it's a very high energy efficiency, mainly by improving the building's envelope to reduce the energy losses you normally have, so that you only need a very low amount of heat to keep it warm and of cooling to keep it cool. And that's in the range of 1/10 what we used to need in the past. So that's the main background. And the surprising is that it not just reduces the amount of energy you need, but it also improves the comfort in the building.
Are there any other benefits on top of that? I mean, they sound like pretty big benefits already.
When you look into the results of the existing passive houses, it's not only the better comfort and the reduced energy demand, it's also that you have a far higher quality of the building envelope, and that means that it will last longer. And there's another benefit, that is it's simpler than the normal way of doing it. So at the end, it's improving also the way we maintain the building in the future.
Does it have to look in a specific way or have a specific style?
Well, if you look at the passive houses already being realized, you won't be able to tell that it is a passive house. That's the other side. You can build any building style, you can build any type of building, you can build offices, swimming halls, schools, dwellings, whatever you want. And you can use any kind of material. You can build in masonry construction, you can build in timber construction, you can build load-bearing structures with concrete, whatever you want.
I keep wondering why this hasn't moved further. How come the construction industry hasn't jumped on this?
Our construction industry is a very conservative industry. So we try to do what we've done all the time. And it's not so easy to change the habits of that part of industry. This is different from automotive and others. But still, it's going really fast at the moment because it's not so different from what we've done in the past. So we can learn how to do that, but we have to decide what we want to learn.
If we didn't do anything, do you see any big problem with energy coming? And if there is a date for that, how soon do you think it would be?
You already have it, or it's energy is much more expensive than it was 10 years ago. A lot of people have problems with paying for their heating bills, so we already have that problem. In addition, we have problems with the consequences of that very big amount of use of fossil fuels in giving carbon dioxide to the Earth's atmosphere. So this is also a growing problem. So we really need to change the way we use energy.
And by using less energy, we will also reduce our carbon footprint. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the main background. The highest amount of energy being used in the UK, in European Union and worldwide is fossil fuel. That is more than 80% of all the energy being used. So if we reduce the amount of energy we need, we'll reduce the amount of fossil fuel burned, and by burning fossil fuel, we emit the carbon dioxide.
Is there a particular place in the world that this standard is best suited, or are you saying it could be introduced anywhere in the world, any temperature range? It's a standard that is a world standard.
It is a world standard, but we have to be cautious. It's not like you build a building in, say, a factory in Japan, and you drop it by a helicopter at any place of the world and it will work. That won't work. It's more a method. It's a method how to design a building adequate to the climate you are in. So a passive house in Jakarta looks significantly different from a passive house in St. Petersburg. But the method how to do it is the same. So as a design method, how to design for good indoor climate, depending on the climate you are in. That's mainly what a passive house is.
So what are the key differences in how you alter the house to make it reach this passive house standard?
Yeah, so let's go back to the UK situation, because the measures are a little bit different whether we are in the UK or we are in, say, Turkey. So let's go back to the UK situation. So the most important thing in the UK is insulation. The second important thing is insulation. And to make the insulation in a way that we really avoid thermal bridging. Third important thing is airtightness. It was a little bit new for the UK because the buildings haven't been airtight in the past, but we've seen it's not such a difficult thing to do. Then there are improved windows. Window quality has a very high influence on the energy balance of buildings. The next thing is, if you build an airtight building, and you'll have to build airtight buildings in the future, you need ventilation, because people need fresh air. So that's the fourth part. And that's it. Insulation, airtightness, good windows, and the ventilation.
What opportunities will be coming out of passive house being introduced more widely?
Well, the most important thing is, of course, we get independent of those foreign energy sources. Yeah, that's a big problem for the European Union, importing lot amounts of fossil fuel from the outside, and that's why the European Commission is behind that development. They want us to get efficient buildings. There's another thing. In order to do that, we have to improve the buildings. So it's an improved building envelope. Now, the interesting thing is that the products needed for that and that the production of the buildings, that's all taking place in the European Union. So this is also creating employment. That's the other reason why lots of governments are behind that type of development. A third thing is that by improving the building envelope, comfort is better. So this is an advantage for the users in the building. And you don't have to talk to me for that. Its best way is to talk to some of the occupants of existing passive house premises to see what they say. And it's very interesting what they say in the UK. So you can ask whomever you want. You'll get very interesting answers about how they feel in their passive houses. This is a win-win situation for all of us. And so that's why I think it's a very good idea to go this path of better efficiency. Well, not only for buildings, it's also possible for office equipment, for cars, and so on.
I've always been someone who's very interested in energy efficiency. When you build a house, the process that I'm going through at the moment, it's all about what choices you can make. And it seems to me that energy efficiency is a very black and white issue. There are other things that are more confusing, but this is something that we should all strive towards. And to me, it's just very simple. I know you have lived in a passive house for quite a long time, and you've talked a little bit about how you feel. But if I'm someone who is buying a passive house, how do I know to begin with that it's been built properly? Is that what the standard actually is? That if I buy a house that's passive house standard, I know it's been constructed and will operate to this efficiency, or do I have to live in it first?
No, well, there is an organization founded here in the UK called the Passivhaus Trust. They are offering certification for passive houses. So if you want to be sure, you can get a certified passive house. And that's very important to have that thing available. That means that now if somebody has an advertisement, he's selling you a passive house, it's well known what this means. So if there is a problem later, it might go to the court, and then the decision will be, well, it's well known what a passive house is because there is a certification available, so nobody can come and say, this is a passive house and it's far from what it is. So we can't stand behind everything what is happening in all parts of the world, but the passive house is one of the developments you can be quite sure that it's done in a proper way.
What do you stand to gain from this? What is your motivation?
Well, the Passivhaus Institute is a small research facility. So we are working in research, for example, developing improved components like the better windows. We are working now together with the city of Frankfurt building the first passive house hospital. So we live from working together with those who get these things realized, the components got on the market, and the government and the European Commission who want us to create a future which is worth living in.
You mentioned about the governments there. Is there anything they should be doing to help along the way?
Yes, there are lots of instruments governments are already using. What we've seen from all around the world, the most important is to create a background where innovation is accepted. Very often this is not easy. It's not easy to do innovative things. And to be able to do innovative things, you need a tolerant environment. That's one of the most important things to get these things done. The second thing is if a government really wants to help that development coming forward, the best thing to do is to give some incentives. And the incentives don't need to be money. In one example from Italy, the government decided that if somebody is building a really energy efficient building, he has allowance for using a bigger part of the land he is building on. So that doesn't cost the taxpayer any money, but it's a big incentive for investors to do energy efficient buildings. So there are lots of examples of what government can do. Also to distribute the information about how to improve efficiency in new construction and in refurbishment of existing buildings.
That is a big issue too, isn't it? The retrofitting all of the existing stock, which I suppose is a large percentage of the houses that we have, because of course we can't build everything brand new.
Yeah.
So what does that challenge mean? I'm assuming that's a lot tougher.
Yes, it is, definitely. It definitely is. The most important thing is that you have to see that the existing building stock is not static. It's developing. You always exchange a window, you fix a roof, you fix a wall, and so on. Now we have to realize that these moments where you fix a roof anyhow, that's the very moment you have to improve the insulation. Otherwise, it's too expensive. Yeah. So that's the way to go. To improve everything at the very moment where you are, if a scaffolding is going up, that's the moment. Yeah, you should decide about improving the components. And if you improve a component, you should go to the best available, because it will be 30 years, 40 years, 50 years until you do it again. Yeah? So that's the philosophy behind improving existing buildings. Now, there are big differences between existing buildings. So on the one extreme, most buildings in Europe have been built in the 60s, 70s, 80s. That's the main part of the building stock. And they are quite easy to refurbish. Well, if they are worth refurbishing, they are quite easy to refurbish. Then there are the buildings, the older ones, some of them listed buildings, and that's a little bit more difficult because we also have to take into account the history of these buildings and the fact that we want to preserve these historical issues. There is a lot of ongoing research, so there are a lot of measures, but we still can do with these, our old ones.
We haven't really talked money, but what is the cost of all of the technology that we need? We've mentioned the windows, etc., the insulation.
Yeah, let's take, for example, a window. Normal windows cost in the range of, I think in UK, is £300 a square meter, something like that. So now if you go to a component which we would call a Passivhaus window, that's triple glazed, well-insulated frame, airtight window, that might be £80 more. So we are discussing a difference of £80 between the normal ones and the Passivhaus ones on the market at the moment. We are working on reducing that difference, but if you calculate for the life cycle cost of this investment, you'll see it's hard to find any investment today which has a better internal interest rate than such an investment. So it's good to do that. It's a different thing, and that's always done the wrong way. You won't exchange this window just for saving energy. That would be, the cost will be £380 per square meter, and that won't work. So that it's again showing that it's very important to do it at the very moment where you exchange the window. Anyhow, that's the decision to be made, and afterwards it's done.
What are your goals for this? You've been working on this technology and this standard for such a long time. Do you set yourself yearly goals, or are you just knowing that when the time is right, it will happen?
To be honest, we are a research institute, so our influence is mainly an indirect influence. So we can help the industry and we can help the government to do that better. But of course, we are not ones who will change the policy or who will be able to move the whole direction of the development. Although a lot of things in the past that happened were somehow induced by the examples we were able to give. So we are concentrating on really good demonstration projects to show what can be done. We are concentrating on producing tools for the architects, for the engineers, to make it easier for them to design such a energy-efficient building. We help organizations like the US Passivhaus Trust to gain members and to gain knowledge and to make that knowledge available. So that's the things we do, and I think we are quite successful with doing that.
One final question, and it's around the future of energy efficiency. You've obviously done a lot of work, and we're hoping that it's going to move in a specific direction, but does it just go on and on, what we can save? Will we look back on the past and think how wasteful we've been?
Well, there is, from a physical point of view, no need to use energy for having comfortable temperatures and things like that. We could from a technical and physical point of view, reduce it to not to zero, but to almost zero. On the other side, there is again no need for that, because there is a certain amount of renewable energy available from wind power, from solar, from water energy. So the development that we have had so far with a passive house is to a point where we call these buildings nearly zero energy buildings. That means that the consumption is 1/10 of what it has been in the past, and what means that the energy you need is so low that it will be available from regional sources of energy anywhere in the world without a big problem. So at the end, there is no need to go much further than that. But of course, it could happen, and we already see some parts of the development happening, it could happen that we get, say, even more efficient windows, which will allow for building buildings which consume even less energy than they do, without increasing costs very much. It's hard to say what will happen in the future, but one thing is clear: the whole perspective of better energy efficiency opens a path in the future where we won't need fossil fuels any longer on a big scale.
Dr. Feist, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Head online to take a look at the show notes for this session. houseplanninghelp.com/Feist. That's Feist. And you can review the key points that we've talked about in this session. Also, there are links to the Passive House Open Days, a great event, as I talked about a little bit earlier. The Passive House Institute, we can link you across to their website. They've got a blog as well. Dr. Feist on Twitter. Or, as I mentioned, houseplanninghelp.com/Feist. Feist. Let's finish as we always do on a hub update, and this is for you if you're looking to build an energy efficient home and you want to be alongside like-minded individuals who've all got different challenges that they're facing there, probably at different parts of the process too. Some will be looking for land, some will be on ahead in construction, but it's just a good way to do this all together. We have our progress calls where it's a bit like a conference call where we all get on and chat about where we are in the process. We've got our private forum too. There's the learning side as well, particularly proud of trying to cover entire projects. At Regen Media, we create video, that's what we do. So these case studies trying to go in depth. Longbarrow Passive House was the first one, and we're now at Buckinghamshire Passive House. We've also got the learning modules, and all of this at a very reasonable price. Now, we're going to be closing the doors of the hub at the end of this month. That's the 25th of November, just so that we can focus on our members and serve them better in the coming months. So we'll open up again at some point in 2017, but really for now, we want you to take advantage. So this is Black Friday as well, the 25th of November. If you want to learn more about the hub, very simply, you can head to houseplanninghelp.com/join. We'd love to have you as a member. That's it. Thank you so much for being there on our first Encore episode. We're having another one next time with Sarah Suzanka. And what's interesting for me about that episode, all about scale. Yeah, how big is too big? Can we have that McMansion? Thank you so much for listening. Catch up next time. Cheers.